My name is Amara Cole, and before I tell you what they did to me in that hospital room before I show you how I burned it all down and built something they could never take away, I need you to understand where I started, because the woman who walked out of that hospital wasn't born. She was made, forged out of grief and loss and a betrayal so calculated it still takes my breath away when I think about it. I was 9 years old when I lost my parents on Interstate 75 outside Atlanta, a semi-truck full speed. My father didn't have a single second to react. My mother, sitting in the passenger seat, took the worst of it. I remembered the smell of the car, my mother's cocoa butter lotion, and a pine tree air freshener. I remember my father's laugh on Sunday mornings, this big, warm, rolling sound that filled every room he walked into. He used to throw me up toward the ceiling and catch me at the last possible second, every single time, without fail. After the accident, I was placed in a state-run foster home in Macon, iron cots lined up in rows, echoing hallways, staff who rotated every 6 months and never bothered to learn our names. We weren't children to them. We were case numbers, file folders in a cabinet. I aged out of the system at 18 with a single bag of clothes and a phone. Number 4, a state housing hotline that rang busy every time I called. I put myself through a community college accounting program not because I had a passion for numbers, but because it was the only program that offered a housing subsidy. Even with a degree, doors stayed closed. Employers saw a foster care background on my application and made promises they never kept. I eventually landed in Atlanta and found work as a sales consultant at a high-end boutique in Virginia Heights. The pay was modest, the work was quiet, but I was surrounded by beautiful things every day, and I held on to the quiet hope that fate would eventually notice me, that one day, something would change. His name was Ethan Vale. He came in looking for a birthday gift for his mother. He spent nearly an hour sorting through silk wraps and cashmere shawls, setting one aside, then another. He carried himself with the specific confidence of a man who had never once checked his bank balance before making a purchase. I helped him choose a hand-painted silk wrap. I didn't push the most expensive options, even though the commission would have helped. He noticed. "Do you always speak to customers with that kind of calm?" he asked, paying with a card that had no spending limit. "How else should I speak?" I replied. "People either flatter or look down. I try to do neither." He came back the next day, and the day after that, a month later, he invited me to dinner at a restaurant I had only ever seen in magazine spreads. Or so I thought. We were married 6 months later in a small courthouse ceremony. Ethan explained it as his mother's preference, no need for a showy display. I didn't argue, though I had quietly dreamed of a white dress and photos to hang on a wall. The most important thing, I told myself, was that I finally had a family. Even if his mother, Cordelia Vale, looked at me with barely disguised contempt, even if I felt like an uninvited guest in their massive estate in Johns Creek, afraid to open the refrigerator without permission. I smiled when Cordelia called me her charity case in front of dinner guests. I told myself patience was its own kind of power. I told myself love could be earned. I was wrong about almost everything. Years into our marriage, Cordelia Vale was diagnosed with chronic kidney failure, dialysis 3 times a week at a private clinic. Her heart was weakening. The transplant waiting list stretched into years' time she simply did not have. Dad even found me in the hospital corridor one afternoon, and he did something I had only ever seen in movies. He dropped to his knees on the cold tile floor, right there, in front of everyone. His voice broke just enough to sound genuine. "I know what I'm asking," he said. "I know it's too much, but you're the only one who can save her. I had your records checked 6 months ago after a routine physical. Just in case, just as a backup, Amara, you're a perfect match. 1 in 1,000. I stood there in silence, trying to absorb the weight of his words. "What about you?" I finally asked. "You're her son, her blood. Why not you?" He pulled out a folded medical report. Incompatibility, documented, stamped, signed. He spread the pages before me like evidence in a trial. I believed him. I wanted to believe him. My entire life had been built on the hope that goodness existed in people. For 3 days, he didn't let up. He brought me coffee in bed, held me close in the dark, said every right thing in exactly the right tone. "You'll truly be part of this family," he whispered one night. "Not just the name on a marriage certificate. Blood and flesh. My mother will love you like her own daughter." I swear it. And after you've recovered, we'll go to Bora Bora. Just the two of us. A whole month. I imagined Cordelia's grateful smile, her arms around me for the first time without coldness. I imagined her saying, "Thank you, daughter. I had spent my entire life wanting to belong to someone. Here was my chance to prove it." "Fine," I said on the third day. "I'll do it." Ethan pulled me close and buried his face in my hair. He didn't let me see his face in that moment. I didn't see the look that crossed his lips. The day before surgery, I was signing documents in the chief of medicine's office. The stack of paper was enormous. My head was pounding from lack of sleep. The lines blurred before my eyes. "One more here," Ethan said casually, pointing to a clause near the bottom of the last page. "Standard hospital formality. A backup protocol. All hospitals require it." I read the words without truly absorbing them. Something about the organ being offered to another compatible patient on the Federal Registry if the primary recipient was deemed medically unfit at the last moment. What did it matter? I just wanted it to be over. I wanted to wake up on the other side of the pain and have a mother who loved me. I signed. The morning of the surgery, the ceiling lights above me merged into a single white streak as the gurney rolled forward. Ethan walked beside me, holding my hand. "I'll be waiting," he said at the operating room doors. He leaned down and kissed me. "The moment you wake up, my face will be the first thing you see." And then Bora Bora. The doors swung closed. The last thing I saw before the anesthesia pulled me under was his face in the narrowing gap. So familiar, so loved, or so I thought. I woke up in the wrong room. The ceiling above me wasn't the pristine white of the private wing Eaton had promised. It was gray, with water-stained patches and a single humming fluorescent light. Instead of a private suite with a tree-lined view, there were 4 beds in a row. A patient by the window coughed steadily. A game show played on a mounted TV no one had turned off. The pain in my left side hit me in waves, thick, dense, rolling through me with every breath. A drainage tube sat under the gauze bandage against my skin. The feel of something foreign in my own body made me dizzy. Where was Ethan? On the 4th day, the door opened. Ethan walked in first, navy suit, perfectly pressed, calm and collected, as though he were arriving at a business lunch. Behind him walked a woman I had never seen before, tall, model-figured, wearing a dress the color of fresh blood. She held Ethan's arm with the ease of someone holding something that had always belonged to her. Behind them, an orderly pushed Cordelia in a wheelchair. She had positioned herself carefully, so she could see my face directly. She didn't want to miss a single expression. Ethan walked to my bedside. He didn't ask how I felt. He dropped a brown envelope onto my chest. "This is for you," he said. His voice was the voice of a man speaking to a waitress who had brought the wrong order. Polite, flat, and utterly indifferent, with trembling fingers. I pulled out the documents. A petition for divorce, filed 3 days ago, the day I was on the operating table. "I don't understand," I whispered. "Why? I did everything you asked. Everything." Cordelia raised one bony hand and gestured for her orderly to stop. She turned her chair so she had a full, unobstructed view of my face. "Did you honestly think my son married you for love?" Her voice was thin and cold, like a blade kept in a freezer. "A foster kid, no money, no education, no family to even ask where you went if you disappeared." The monitor beside my bed began to beep. The numbers climbed. "You were needed because you were a match, and because you had no one." The woman in red stepped forward. "My name is Serena Cross," he said with a smile built entirely from contempt. "Ethan and I have been together since college. While I was building my career in London, he found a temporary replacement with the right biological parameters." He placed one hand on her stomach, a gesture so small and so monstrous. "The future Vale heir is right here, the legitimate heir. We planned this entire marriage over a year ago, as soon as Cordelia was diagnosed and it became clear she needed a donor." Ethan reached into his jacket pocket and set a thin stack of bills on the bedside table, bound with a rubber band. $11,000, he said. "Enough for a deposit on a studio while you recover. Sign the papers without a fight, and we part on good terms." I looked at that stack of money, at that pathetic bundle of paper thrown at me like a dinner tip, and something inside me, some last remaining wall, cracked. $10,000 from my kidney, I said, my voice shaking. For 2 years of my life, I'm going to the police. I'm going to tell them everything. Tell them what Ethan didn't even raise his voice. That you voluntarily signed an informed consent form. Voluntarily, Amara, that's the key word. No coercion. No pressure. We have your signature on every document. Cordelia waved her hand at the orderly. Let's go. It smells like bleach and poverty in here. They turned toward the door, all three of them, never looking back. And then the door swung open from the outside. A man in a white coat walked in, tall, gray-haired, with the focused eyes of someone accustomed to making life and death calls before breakfast. 2 nurses flanked him. What is going on in this room? His voice cut through the air like a scalpel. Dr. Brennan, chief of medicine. He looked at the monitor. He looked at my face. He looked at the 3 people by the door. His eyes settled on Ethan with something very close to pure disgust. Mr. Val, I'm afraid I have news for you. He paused. Your mother's transplant was cancelled. What do you mean, cancelled? Cordelia's voice cracked. Immediately before the transplant, Dr. Brennan said, your final blood work revealed an acute cardiac complication and a previously undetected infection. If we had proceeded, you would almost certainly have died on the table. The surgical board made the decision to abort. Ethan's face drained of color. And the kidney, he stammered. What about the kidney? A harvested organ has a survival window of only a few hours, Brennan said, crossing his arms. When the primary recipient is deemed unfit, protocol dictates the organ be offered to the next compatible patient on the Federal Registry. Thanks to a clause in the agreement your wife signed, we had full legal authority to save another life. That's our property. Ethan stepped forward. We paid for this surgery. We have rights. A human organ is not property, Mr. Vale. Brennan's voice dropped to a register that ended the conversation. It is not a commodity you can refrigerate and use at your convenience. He turned to me. His voice softened entirely. The recipient gave permission to share his identity with the donor. He wants to thank you personally. He paused. His name is Raymond Holt. The name hit the room like a THUNDERCLAP. Raymond Holt, founder of the Holt Development Corporation, owner of half the Atlanta skyline, one of the most powerful philanthropists in the Southeast. There had been rumors for months about a mystery illness that had pulled him from public life. Now we knew why. Ethan's textile empire was pocket change next to a man like Holt. His lips moved silently, repeating the name, as the full weight of what he had orchestrated and lost descended on him. Mr. Holt's assistant has asked me to convey, Brennan continued, speaking only to me now, that he wishes to move you to a private executive suite immediately. He wants to personally thank the woman who saved his life. I looked at the 3 people by the door, people who, 60 seconds ago, had radiated triumph. Now they stood with the faces of people watching their world disassemble in real time. Ethan's voice changed, became soft, honeyed. Amara, honeyed, forget the papers. It was a test. We were overwhelmed. We didn't mean. He reached for my hand and I pulled it away so sharply the pain flared in my side like a hot wire. I didn't make a sound. I turned to Dr. Brennan. My voice, when it came, was a voice I had never heard from myself before. Calm, still, cold as a Georgia winter morning. Doctor, please call security. There are strangers in my room. The executive suite on the top floor was a different universe, full of tossling windows with a view over the city, a leather sofa, a private bath, a large screen on the wall. Raymond Holt's chief of staff, Marcus Whitfield, sharp eyes, precise manner, informed me that all medical expenses and recovery costs would be covered in full by the Holt Foundation. Why? I asked. The tears came again, not from pain, but from the sheer contrast of it all. For Mr. Holt, Marcus said quietly, your gift is a second chance to see the sun rise over Georgia. He always pays his debts. 3 weeks later, I met Raymond Holt on the rooftop garden of the clinic. Even wrapped in a blanket, he radiated the quiet gravity of a man who had built empires. So this is the girl, he said, studying me from beneath gray brows. The woman who gave part of herself to a demon only for fate to redirect the gift to me. He had already researched my story. Everything. The foster home, the boutique, the marriage, the betrayal, all of it. The money from Vale's assets is a start, he said, and I would learn later what he meant by that. But without the skill to manage it, it vanishes like morning fog. The world is cruel, Amara. A good person without teeth gets eaten alive. He reached out a wrinkled hand. Let me be your mentor legally. We can arrange an adult adoption, just a name change on paper. But in reality, family, enter my world. Learn from me. Become the woman who can look at her former husband and see, not a giant, but a very small, very frightened man. I thought of Cordelia's sneer, Serena's smile, Ethan's cold eyes, and the rubber-banded stack of bills. If I went back into that world as just Amara Cole, without resources, without teeth, they would find a way to crush me again. I took Raymond Holt's hand. My grip was steadier than anyone would have expected from a woman 3 weeks out of surgery. Teach me, I said. Teach me everything. The months that followed were relentless. 5 in the morning, physical therapy. 7, breakfast with Raymond dissecting the financial news. Why did tech dip? How does that affect Southeast real estate? 9 to 3, private tutors, management, corporate law, public speaking. 4 to 7, sitting in on live negotiations at Holt Development. My community college accounting foundation was solid. I'd just never had the chance to build on it. Every lesson was a brick. Every case study was a weapon. At night, I sometimes cried from exhaustion. The scar on my left side ached before the rain, but every morning, I got up, and I kept going. The external changes reflected the internal transformation. The baggy clothes replaced by bespoke tailoring. The uncertain eyes replaced by something sharper, quieter, more dangerous. No more begging for approval. No more fussicate fear of being unwanted. Only the clear, analytical gaze of a woman who knew exactly what she was worth and exactly what had been stolen from her. Thomas Reed, head of Holt's legal department, a man who looked like he had won 1,000 courtrooms and lost none, arrived every week with updates. The divorce finalized 4 months ago, he said at one meeting. A judge signed the decree in a single session. Vale is planning a lavish wedding with Serena Krauss, 500 guests, designer dress from Milan. He paused. Cordelia's condition is deteriorating. Dialysis 3 times a week. Cardiac complications. Over $50,000 a month just to keep her stable. He's started selling the cars. The Porsche went first. Then the Wagenvein Textiles is actively searching for a major investor to cover a significant cash flow gap. I turned toward the window. The Atlanta skyline stretched to the dark horizon. Then we give him an investor. I said it quietly, almost to myself. Create a shell company, Ember Capital. Delaware registration. Nominee directors. No visible link to the Holt Group. Thomas's pen paused. What's the end game? I turned back to face him. Not to buy his company. That's too fast. Too merciful. We're going to put a golden noose around his neck. One he will happily tighten himself, thinking it's a life preserver. Thomas Reed allowed himself a small smile. Welcome to the business, Amara Sterling. The invitation arrived by courier 2 weeks later. A heavy, gold-embossed envelope hinting at a potential partnership between Ember Capital and a promising textile manufacturer. It offered the possibility of a significant investment in exchange for a meeting at an exclusive black-tie gala for Holt Development investors. Bael didn't ask why a group like Ember Capital was suddenly interested in his sinking company. He didn't investigate the nominee directors. He only saw the potential. Check. He was already calculating how many problems it could solve. The restaurant was glowing that evening. Ethan stood at the bar, composed, confident, the performance of a man whose empire was not quietly collapsing. Raymond Holt stepped to the microphone. On the small stage, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce the new CEO of Ember Capital, my associate. He paused and looked toward the staircase. Amara Sterling. Across the room, Sienna's glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the marble floor. Ethan stood completely frozen, the color draining from his face. The woman they had abandoned in a public ward, surrounded by strangers, bleeding, holding divorce papers, was standing at the front of the most powerful room in Atlanta. That's impossible, Serena whispered, her grip tightening on Ethan's arm. We have to leave now. Wait. Ethan brushed her hand away. His eyes tracked me across the room. She loved me once. Maybe she still does. Don't you see? This is our chance. He pushed through the crowd, called my name. I turned out. My face was a mask of polite neutrality. I'm sorry, do we know each other, Amara? It's me, Julian, Ethan, your husband. I tilted my head slightly, as though searching a distant memory. Ah, Mr. Vale. Yes, I've reviewed your file. My analyst prepared a full report. Declining revenue, overdue debt, significant cash flow gap. I let the pause sit. Come to my office Monday. We'll discuss possibilities, but be warned, strictly business, no personal topic. On Monday, Ethan sat at the far end of the conference, tables surrounded by my legal team. His fabricated financial report lasted approximately 11 minutes before our analysts had dismantled it entirely. Empty vendor contracts, non-existent revenue lines, inflated sales figures inserted within the last 48 hours. Despite all of this, he said, letting the silence settle over the room, we are prepared to invest $2 million. Ethan looked up. A convertible loan. I continued, collateralized by all company shares and the personal assets of the borrower. If the agreed sales targets are not met within 90 days, full asset transfer to Ember Capital. I met his eyes. Surely, a professional of your experience is confident in his own capabilities, Mr. Val. He signed without hesitation. After he left, Thomas Reed allowed himself a full, open grin. He just pledged assets that, by court decree, belonged to you, Amara, the Savannah warehouse, the Midtown commercial property, the Johns Creek estate. Attempting to pledge someone else's assets as loan collateral is bank fraud. Federal offense, 10 to 20 years. And the targets, I asked, mathematically impossible. We've already pressured his 3 largest distribution clients into suspending their contracts. 1 week later, the file on Serena Krause arrived. Photographs at romantic dinners with a man named Troy, a club owner with a lengthy criminal record. Regular transfers from Ethan's company accounts to Troy's personal accounts. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. And a pregnant timeline. Serena was 20 weeks along. Conception 4.5 months ago. During that exact week, Ethan had been in New York for a textile expo 7 consecutive days. Security footage from an Atlanta hotel showed Serena and Troy entering and leaving a room together each day of that same period. The child isn't his, I said, closing the folder. Classic scheme, Marcus confirmed. She planned to drain his accounts and disappear with her partner once she gained access to a large enough sum. Emboldened by the loan contract, believing he had me back in his orbit, even invited me to dinner to celebrate the partnership. He performed regret beautifully. His mother's pressure, his weakness. Serena was a mistake. He was ready to leave her. He had always loved me. The digital recorder in my purse captured every word, every inflection, every lie. I'll think about it, I said, rising and draping my coat over my shoulders. Enjoy your dinner, Ethan. I paused at the door. It may be the last one you have at this level. The 90 days expired in mid-March. The team from Ember Capital arrived at Ethan's office with forensic auditors and federal agents. He was at his desk, confident he had submitted another forged report showing a 200% sales increase. He had not learned a single thing. The audit took 40 minutes. Empty warehouses, idle machinery, ghost contracts that dissolved under scrutiny like paper in water. The FBI is in the lobby, Thomas said quietly, beginning to pack documents into a briefcase. Bank fraud, wire fraud, obstruction. You are looking at a very significant period of time, Mr. Va. Ethan bolted through the back exit and drove to the hospital, racing to say goodbye to his mother before the inevitable. In Cordelia's room, he found Serena. She was frantically stuffing his watches and gold cufflinks into her designer bag. What are you doing? Leaving, she said flatly. Before the feds get here, I am not going down with a sinking ship. I walked in wearing white. I dropped the folder. The photographs scattered across the floor. Serena and Troy. The bank transfers. The medical records. The timeline. Ethan grabbed the photographs. His face turned dark. The baby, he said slowly. It's not mine. Typo blah, I said without expression. Your type A, Serena is type B. The math is straightforward. Ethan. High school biology. He struck Serena across the face. She screamed, "You're nothing. Your mother is a fossil. I've always hated you both." Then I pulled out my phone and played the recording from our dinner. Ethan's own voice filled the room. Serena is a burden. The baby was a mistake. I'll put my mother in a care home. She's a nuisance with her illnesses. Cordelia Vale, hooked up to her machines, heard every word. Her son, the one for whom she had humiliated me. the one for whom she had demanded my kidney. He had been planning to discard her like old furniture. The monitors surged. Her hand reached toward me, bony, trembling, clawing at the air. "Help me," she rasped. "Please, daughter." I walked to her bedside. I looked at that hand, the same hand that had waved dismissively while she called me a charity case in front of her dinner guests. "My kidney was a gift of love," I said quietly. "I would have given it to the mother I lost when I was 9 years old. You are not my mother, Cordelia. You are the woman who ordered her son to divorce me while I was in the ICU, while I was bleeding, wondering if I would survive." Bamonda flatlined. A long, high-pitched whistle. Cordelia Vell's heart had not failed, only from kidney disease. It had broken from the only betrayal it could not survive, her son's. I walked out without looking back. The arrest happened 2 days later. At the funeral, the ceremony was sparse, a few distant relatives, the funeral home staff. Word of the bankruptcy filing and the criminal case had spread through their social circle like fire through dry grass. No one wanted proximity to a falling man. As the casket descended into the Georgia red clay, 2 plain-clothes federal agents moved quietly through the gathered mourners. The handcuffs clicked at the graveside. As they walked Ethan to the vehicle, he noticed a black Mercedes parked on the cemetery path. The tinted window lowered an inch. There, in dark glasses, on an overcast day, was Amara Sterling. She looked at him, not with triumph, not with malice. She looked at him the way you look at a finished painting, a closed chapter, something that used to mean something and no longer does. The window rose, the car moved, and disappeared around the bend. A year later, I stood before my parents' graves. I placed white lilies on the stones, now properly maintained, with fresh flowers and trimmed edge. I spoke to them softly. I told them how much had changed, how I now paid for treatments for people who couldn't afford them, how I hired lawyers for people being cheated, how I was building something that would last. The scar on my left side had faded to a thin, pale line. I used to hate it. I used to see it as proof of my own naivety. Now I saw it differently. A metal proof that I had walked through fire, hit the lowest point a person can reach, and clawed my way back up, not as the person I had been, but as someone stronger, sharper, and genuinely, deeply free. Am I interrupting? I turned at the familiar voice. Dr. Brennan stood on the path. Jeans, flannel shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbow, 2 coffees, steam rising in the cool air. "Mr. Holt asked me to remind you, don't stay too long. There's a board meeting tomorrow. Tell him thank you for the concern." I smiled. Brennan hesitated. Something in his expression shifted from professional to simply human. "Amara, do you have time for dinner? Not a business dinner, just dinner. Between us." I looked at him, the man who had protected me in that hospital room when no one else had, who had checked on me every evening during recovery. In his eyes, there was no calculation, no agenda, only genuine, uncomplicated care. "How do you feel about hole-in-the-wall BBQ in downtown?" I asked. "Or do you strictly need white tablecloths?" He laughed, warm, open, unguarded, and reached out his hand. We walked down the path together, shoulder to shoulder. The sun was setting over the Georgia hills, painting the sky in deep gold and amber. It would set, leaving the world in darkness, but tomorrow it would rise again, and so would she.